The twin suns of the desert world hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the sandy plains. The air shimmered with heat, and a dry wind carried the faint hum of distant mining machines. In the middle of that wide and lonely land stood a small outpost built from old metal panels, weathered wood, and whatever scraps could be found in the wreckage fields. Tom knelt beside a rusted water pump, tightening bolts with a wrench that had seen better days. Sweat rolled down his face as he worked. The pump had been acting up for a week, and without it, the outpost would run dry. It was the kind of simple, repetitive work he had grown used to. Quiet work, peaceful work. Tom had lived on this planet for almost 5 years. He liked its silence. No crowded cities, no endless noise, no one giving orders. The few traders and wanderers who passed through rarely stayed long, and that was fine by him. The desert was harsh, but it was honest. You could see trouble coming from far away here, or so he thought. That afternoon, as Tom leaned back to rest his hands, something strange caught his eye. Out in the distance, where the air shimmered with heat, a shape appeared. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the light, one of those mirages that danced on the horizon. But this shape grew clearer. A tall figure was walking toward him, step by step. As if the desert heat meant nothing, Tom frowned. Nobody traveled this way without a speeder or a transport drone. The nearest settlement was 3 days away on foot. He picked up his tool and stood, watching as the figure came closer. He could make out details. It was a woman. Her skin was the color of clear summer sky, a soft, deep blue that almost seemed to shine in the sun. Her black hair was tied back, and she moved with a purpose, her eyes fixed straight on him. Tom's grip on the wrench tightened. He knew that face, years ago, on a different world. He had found her half buried in the wreckage of a ship that had fallen from the sky. She had been injured, barely able to speak, and terrified. He had carried her to safety, given her food and shelter, and fixed her broken breathing mask so she could survive. Back then, she had been quiet, almost shy. When she left, she had thanked him in a soft voice and promised she would not forget his kindness. Now, there was nothing soft about her. She stopped a few paces away. Her gaze swept over him and the outpost, taking in every detail before meeting his eyes. Tom, she said. Her voice was calm, but there was a weight in it, a tone that made it clear this was not a friendly visit. Lena, Tom replied, his voice careful. It's been a long time. Yes, she said. And now the time has come. Tom raised an eyebrow. The time for what? She stepped closer. You once told me, when I was weak and you carried me from the wreckage, that you would help me if I ever needed it. I'm here to ask for that help. Tom shook his head slowly. I remember helping you. I don't remember making promises. Her eyes narrowed. You did. You may have forgotten. But I have not. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of the pump's slow ticking. Tom felt uneasy. There was a hardness in her voice, as if she wasn't asking, she was telling. I live a quiet life now, he said. I don't have a ship. I don't travel. Whatever trouble you're in, I'm not the man for the job. Her jaw tightened. You are the only man for the job. My people are in danger. There are those who hunt me, and they are coming. If they find me here, they will find you too. Tom crossed his arms. You brought them here. I had no choice, she said. Her tone was firm, but her eyes flickered for a moment, as if a part of her knew this was unfair. I need your help to get to safety, and I need it now. Tom looked out at the horizon. The heat haze was thicker now, but he saw no ships, no signs of movement. Still, something about her presence set his nerves on edge. Why come to me after all these years? He asked. Because you are human, Lena said, and humans keep their word. Tom sighed. He remembered that day long ago, the smell of smoke from the crashed ship, the way her small hands had clung to his jacket as he carried her through the storm. She had been desperate then, helpless, but now she stood like a soldier, and her words felt more like an order than a plea. The suns were dipping lower, painting the desert gold and red. Tom could feel the air cooling, but the tension between them only grew warmer. You're asking for more than you know, he said quietly. I know exactly what I'm asking. Lena replied, and I am not leaving without it. Her voice was final, like a door closing. Tom stared at her for a long moment. He could turn her away, send her back into the desert, and keep his quiet life. But deep down, he knew trouble was already here. The girl he had saved long ago had returned, and she was no longer asking nicely. The desert night fell quickly, as it always did. One moment the twin suns were glowing over the horizon, and the next, shadows stretched across the land, swallowing the gold light. Tom sat by the small table inside his outpost, a mug of lukewarm tea in his hand. Across from him, Lena sat perfectly still, her eyes never leaving him. He had given her water, and she drank it without thanks. Her posture was straight, her voice calm. But there was an unshakable certainty in the way she spoke. She had come here for one reason, and she would not leave without it. You saved my life, Lena began. When my ship crashed, you carried me to shelter. You fixed my breathing mask. You shared your food. You told me I could count on you if I ever needed help again. Tom set his mug down. I told you I'd help if I could. That was a long time ago, Lena. A lot has changed since then. Her eyes narrowed. Nothing has changed. A promise is. A promise. Tom leaned back in his chair. You don't understand. I'm not the man I was back then. I don't have a fast ship anymore. I don't take risks. I just keep this place running. And I keep out of trouble. Lena's voice was firm. You think trouble will leave you alone if you stay here. It will not. My enemies are already searching for me. They will find this place soon. And when they do, they will not care who you are or what you want. They will burn everything. Her words made the room feel colder. Even though the heater hummed in the corner, Tom stared at her, searching her expression for any sign of exaggeration, but found none. She truly believed what she was saying. He rubbed his forehead. Why are they after you? Lena hesitated for the first time. Her gaze dropped to the table. Because I have something they want, something they cannot be allowed to take. Tom waited for her to go on, but she said nothing more. That's it? He asked. You show up after yours. Tell me enemies are coming and expect me to jump in without knowing the full story? You do not need to know everything, she said. You only need to know that helping me will save lives, many lives. Tom shook his head slowly. That's not enough. Lena. Her eyes locked on his, and her voice softened, but only slightly. You think I came here because I had no other choice. You are wrong. I chose you because you once proved you could do the right thing, even when it was dangerous. I trusted you then. I trust you now. Her words stirred something in him. He remembered the young woman he had carried out of the wreckage, barely conscious, her breathing ragged. He remembered thinking she might not survive the night. He had not expected to see her again, certainly not like this. Tom stood and walked to the window. Outside, the desert stretched under the pale light of the moons in the far distance. The faint shapes of rock spires rose like black teeth against the sky. The world looked quiet, peaceful. But if Lena was telling the truth, that peace would not last, even if I wanted to help, Tom said, still looking out. I don't have the means. My ship's buried under half the desert. Its engines haven't run in years. Then we will dig it out. Lena replied, we will fix it. You have tools, and I have the skill. Together, we can make it fly. Tom turned to face her. You sound very sure of yourself. I have been running for a long time, she said. I have learned to be sure. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Tom sighed. If I say no, what happens? Lena didn't hesitate. Then you will still see me again. But next time, it will be too late for both of us. Tom stared at her for a long moment. There was no threat in her voice, only certainty. She truly believed the danger would reach him whether he helped or not. He walked back to the table and sat down. You're asking a lot, Lena. I am asking what you promised, she said. Tom leaned back, thinking. He had told himself for years that he was done with the kind of life that required fast ships, quick thinking, and endless risk. He had traded that life for sand, solitude, and the sound of the wind against metal walls. But now, The past had walked right into his outpost, wearing the face of a woman with blue skin and steady eyes. "I'll think about it," he said finally. Lena shook her head. "There's no time to think. The danger is moving even now. If we wait, it will find us here." Tom opened his mouth to argue, but a faint beeping from the corner of the room cut him off. Both of them turned toward the source, a small, battered device sitting on the shelf. It was his early warning sensor, connected to a scanner on the roof. The beeping grew faster. Tom stood and checked the display. A faint red light blinked on the screen, marking an object entering the atmosphere. Then another, and another dot. Lena stood behind him, her face unreadable. "They are here sooner than I thought." Tom stared at the blinking lights. "You weren't lying." "I told you," she said quietly. "Now you must decide." The beeping continued, steady and sharp. Out in the desert night, somewhere beyond the horizon, ships were falling toward the planet. They were not here for him, but they would not care about that dot. Tom looked at Lena one more time. She was calm, but he could see tension in the way she held herself, ready to move at a moment's notice. The debt she claimed might not have been clear in his mind, but the danger was real enough, and his quiet life, he realized, might already be over. The desert night was silent except for the faint beeping of the scanner. Tom stood over the display, his jaw tight. 3 signals now, all moving fast. "They're entering low orbit," Tom said quietly. Lena stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the blinking dots. "Those are scout ships. They'll spread out and sweep the surface. Once they find a trace of me, they'll send the main fleet." Tom looked at her. "You sound like you've done this before." "I have," she replied. "Too many times." Tom tapped a button on the console, switching the view to the outer cameras. Grainy black and white images appeared, dark skies, the pale moonlight glinting off the metal edges of his outpost, and the open desert stretching endlessly. Nothing yet, but the scanner didn't lie. The shadows in the sky were coming. Tom turned to Lena. "If we're going to move, we'd better do it now." Her answer was immediate. "Then show me where your ship is buried." Tom grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The night air was cool and dry, carrying the scent of dust. Above, the stars were sharp and clear, but he could see faint streaks of movement like meteors falling slow. He knew those were the enemy ships breaking through the atmosphere. They walked across the sand to a large mound near the edge of the outpost. The wind had piled the dunes high here over the years, hiding what was underneath. Tom crouched and brushed away a layer of sand, revealing dull, scratched metal. "This is her," Tom said. "Old cargo hauler. She was my home before I decided. I'd had enough of running jobs across the sectors. I parked her here, stripped out what I didn't need, and let the desert cover her." Lena knelt beside him, running her hand over the metal. "Engines, old," Tom said, "but still there. It's the fuel that's the problem." She gave him a steady look. "I know where to get fuel, but we have to dig her out first." Tom sighed. "That'll take hours, maybe a full day." Lena glanced up at the sky. "We have less than that." They returned to the outpost for tools, shovels, a portable digger, and a set of old floodlights. The hum of the lights filled the air as they began to cut into the sand. Each shovelful revealed more of the ship's hull, flat plates of worn gray metal, the faded paint still showing the registration number from years ago. Tom worked in silence, his thoughts racing. The signals on the scanner weren't just moving, they were circling. It meant the scouts were starting their search pattern. If they had equipment tuned to track life signs, it was only a matter of time before they found the outpost. Lena worked with fast, efficient movements. She didn't tire easily, and she didn't waste time talking unless it was important. After an hour, she asked, "Do you trust me?" Tom stopped digging and looked at her. "Right now, I don't have much choice, do I?" She didn't smile, but her eyes softened for a moment. "If we can get this ship in the air, I can take us to a place where they won't find us. At least for a while. You still haven't told me who they are," Tom said. Her gaze shifted to the horizon. "They call themselves the Syndic, a chain of warlords and traitors bound together by greed. They destroy what they can't control. I escaped them once. They've been hunting me ever since." Tom went back to digging, and now they're hunting me too. The hours passed, and the ship slowly emerged from the sand like a giant awakening. From sleep, the cargo hauler's hull was dented and faded, but it still looked solid. The landing struts were buried deep, but the main hatch was reachable. Tom climbed up and punched in an old code. The hatch groaned before sliding open, releasing a wave of stale air. Inside, the ship smelled of metal and dust. Rows of storage lockers lined the walls. The cockpit sat at the far end, its control panels dark. Lena stepped in behind him, running her fingers over the panels. "We can make this work," she said. "If the engines are intact, I can bring them online." Tom glanced at her. "And the fuel?" She hesitated, then said, "There's an abandoned relay station 300 kilometers east. The Syndic stripped it years ago, but they left the fuel tanks. I've been there before." Before Tom could reply, a sharp tone rang out from the communicator on his belt. He pulled it off and checked the signal. It was the scanner alarm from the outpost. He stepped outside and looked toward the sky. The streaks of light were no longer faint, they were bright. Moving fast. "They're here," he said. Lena stood beside him, her voice steady. "Then we have to move faster." They worked until their muscles burned. The floodlights cast long shadows over the sand as the ship's full shape came into view. Tom kept glancing at the horizon. He could see distant flashes, now searchlights, sweeping the desert floor. Finally, with the last of the sand cleared from the hatch and the engine vents, Lena stepped back. "It's enough. We can start her up and move." Tom wiped the sweat from his forehead. "She hasn't flown in years. This could go very badly. It will go worse if we stay here," she replied. Tom climbed into the cockpit and lowered himself into the pilot's seat. The controls felt familiar, like an old coat he hadn't worn in years. He flicked the power switch, and the panels lit up weakly. Warning lights glowed red. Lena moved to the engineer's station, her fingers flying over the switches. "Reactor is dormant," she said. "Give me a moment." Tom watched the sky through the forward window. The searchlights were closer now. He could almost hear the faint hum of engines. Lena's voice cut through the tension. "Reactor coming online. Power at 40%. Engines in standby." 40% isn't enough to lift," Tom said. "It's enough to get us out of sight," she replied. The hum of the reactor grew louder, and the deck vibrated under their feet. Tom gripped the controls and took a deep breath. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see if you still have some life in you." He pulled the throttle back, and the ship groaned in protest. Slowly, painfully, it began to rise above the sand. Outside, the shadows in the sky turned toward them. The cargo hauler shook as it lifted from the sand. The old hull groaned like a tired animal waking after years of sleep. Inside the cockpit, Tom's hands stayed tight on the controls, forcing the ship to keep climbing. "Altitude is stable," Lena said, watching the engineer's display. "But the power flow is uneven. If we push too hard, we could lose the left engine." Tom didn't take his eyes off the horizon. "If we don't push, we're going to have a bigger problem than that." Through the cockpit window, 3 bright points of light were moving toward them. The scout ships were closing fast. Their searchlights swept the desert floor, slicing through the darkness. Lena moved to the side panel and began typing commands into the old navigation system. "I'm setting a course to the relay station. It's east of here, across the stone belt." Tom gave a short nod. "How much power do we need to make that jump?" "At least 60%. She said. "Right now, we have 42. Tom's jaw tightened. "Then we're going to have to make the most of what we've got." The ship cleared the last of the dunes, its shadows stretching across the ground far below. The wind howled against the hull as Tom angled them away from the oncoming scouts. "Do we have shields?" Tom asked. "Minimal," Lena said. "I can give you 5 minutes of protection, maybe 6 after that." "Nothing. That's better than 0. The scanner lit up with warning signals as the scouts locked onto them. A sharp tone echoed in the cockpit. "Missiles?" Tom asked. "Not yet," Lena replied. "They're trying to close the distance first." Tom swung the ship hard to the right, the engine straining against the sudden turn. Dust and small rocks whipped past the hull as they skimmed over the Edge of a rocky canyon. The scouts followed. They're faster than us, Lena said. I know. Tom replied. That's why we don't fly in straight lines. He dipped the hauler low. Following the twist of the canyon, the old ship vibrated with every sharp movement, but the narrow walls helped block the scouts' firing angle. Lena glanced at the engine readouts. Reactor output is climbing, 45% now. Keep it coming, Tom said, for a few moments. The chase stayed at a distance. The canyon walls hid them from direct fire, and the ship's bulk made it harder for the scouts to match every turn. But Tom knew it was only buying them time. The canyon opened into a wide basin filled with jagged rocks. In the distance, a shimmering line marked the beginning of the stone belt, a massive region of sharp ridges and shifting debris. That's the belt? Tom asked. Yes, Lena said. It's dangerous to cross at full speed, but it's the fastest way to the relay station. Dangerous sounds fine, Tom said. We'll take it. They skimmed over the rocky ground, heading straight for the shimmering edge. The scouts closed in again, their engines a dull roar behind them. Then the first shot came. A bright bolt of energy streaked past the cockpit, missing by only a few meters. The shields flared faintly as a second shot grazed the hull. Lina's fingers flew over the panel. Shields at 80%. Tom gritted his teeth. Let's hope we don't need them for long. The stone belt rose up before them, towering spires of rock, some leaning, some jagged, all shifting slowly with the desert winds. Flying through it was like threading a needle while running at full speed. Tom didn't slow down. The hauler weaved between the rocks, its old engines groaning in protest. Dust and shattered stone burst around them as the narrow passages scraped the ship's sides. The scouts followed, but their smaller size let them slip through more easily. Another blast hit the shields, shaking the cockpit. Shields at 60%, Lena called out. Tom didn't reply. He was too busy steering through a gap barely wider than the ship. The hull scraped against stone, leaving deep marks along the metal. Reactor at 50%, Lena said. We're getting closer to what we need. A flash in the corner of Tom's vision made him glance up. One of the scouts had tried to cut across a ridge to get ahead of them, but the narrow gap tore off part of its wing. It spun out of control, smashing into a pillar of rock. One down, Tom muttered. The other two scouts pressed harder, weaving between the rocks and firing whenever they had a clear shot. The shields flickered again. Shields at 40%, Lena warned. Tom's eyes narrowed. We just have to hold until we hit open ground on the other side. The belt spires began to thin. The open desert was visible ahead, a wide stretch under the pale light of the moons. Beyond that, the dark outline of the relay station stood like a skeleton against the horizon. There, Tom said. Lena checked the scanner. The scouts are still behind us. Once we leave the cover of the rocks, they'll have a clean shot. Tom's hands tightened on the controls. Then we make them work for it. The hull burst from the belt, engines roaring as Tom pushed the throttle to its limit. The open desert stretched ahead, every bump in the sand rattling the hull. The scouts opened fire immediately. The shields flared bright, then dimmed. Shields at 15%, Lena shouted. Reactor, Tom asked. 58%, close. Enough, he said. He yanked the controls hard to the left, diving toward a shallow ravine. The sudden drop hid them from the scouts for a few seconds, just long enough for Lena to reroute power from the shields to the engines. Engines boosted, she said. The hauler surged forward, climbing out of the ravine and racing toward the relay station. Behind them, the scouts fired again, but the extra speed carried them just out of range. Minutes later, the outline of the station loomed larger, tall towers of rusted metal, broken antennas, and half-collapsed platforms. That's it, Lena said. If the tanks are still there, we'll have enough fuel to make the real jump. Tom kept his eyes on the horizon. Let's hope no one else is waiting for us. The relay station rose ahead like the bones of some giant creature, its towers and platforms leaning in strange angles. Rust streaked the metal, and holes gaped in the walls, where storms had torn through long ago. Round it, chunks of old equipment and broken satellites floated in the thin upper atmosphere, slowly drifting in wide, lazy circles. Tom slowed the hauler as they approached. How close do we need to get? Lena scanned the console. The tanks are on the far side, near the main reactor housing. We'll have to go round the station to reach them. Of course we will, Tom muttered. Nothing's ever easy. Behind them, the two remaining scout ships closed in again. Their engines glowed white in the darkness, cutting through the thin clouds as they followed. They're not giving up, Lena said. They never do, Tom replied, angling the hauler toward a gap between two drifting pieces of wreckage. Hold on. The hauler slipped through the gap with meters to spare. A scout tried to follow, but clipped its wing on the edge of a floating metal beam. Sparks burst from the impact. But the smaller craft kept going. Lena kept her eyes on the sensor screen. They're trying to flank us. One is moving to the upper side. The other is staying low. Then we make them work for it. Tom steered the hauler into the field of debris surrounding the relay station. Old panels, broken struts, and shattered antenna arrays spun slowly, creating a maze of moving obstacles. The hauler's old engines groaned as Tom weaved through them, banking hard left, then right, keeping the path unpredictable. One of the scouts opened fire. Energy bolts sliced past, hitting a chunk of drifting metal that exploded into smaller pieces. The fragments spun toward the hauler, and Tom had to jerk the controls to avoid a direct hit. Shields at 10%, Lena warned. We'll be fine, Tom said. Though his voice carried little comfort, the relay station grew larger in the window until its towering main structure filled most of their view. Large holes in the hull revealed dark corridors and twisted machinery inside. A faint blue glow came from the far side, the reflection of the station's dormant reactor casing. That's where the tanks are, Lena said, pointing to the glow. We just have to survive long enough to get there. The two scouts split. Their approach, one circling above the station and the other diving low toward the surface. They're trying to trap us, Tom said. They think we'll choose the easier path, Lena replied. Tom smirked. Then we take the hard one. He dove the hauler under one of the station's broken platforms. The hull scraped against the rusted edge, sending a shiver through the ship. Metal debris clanged against the sides as they forced their way into a narrow passage between two sections of the station's outer frame. The upper scout moved to cut them off, but the gap was too small for its wider frame. The pilot fired anyway, and bright blasts lit up the corridor, each one narrowly missing. Tom angled the ship sharply and burst out the other side of the station, coming up just short of the reactor housing. There, Lena said. Set us down. By that service hatch, Tom landed the hauler on a tilted platform. The metal groaned under the weight, but it held. Lena was already moving toward the cargo hold. We'll need the portable pumps to transfer the fuel. Tom grabbed his sidearm and followed her. The airlock opened with a hiss, revealing the silent structure of the station up close. The metal surface was covered in dust and pitted with old scorch marks. They crossed to the service hatch. Lena knelt by the control panel, brushing away sand and debris before connecting a small device from her belt. Sparks flickered, and the hatch creaked open. Inside, narrow metal corridors twisted toward the reactor core. The air was thin but breathable. Tom's boots echoed on the floor as they moved. The sound too loud in the quiet. Lena led the way with confident steps, as if she had been here before. You've been here more than once, Tom said quietly. Twice, she replied. Once to hide something, once to make sure it was still here. Tom frowned but didn't press further. They reached a wide chamber where massive cylindrical fuel tanks lined the walls. Faded warning signs in several languages were still visible. Though the paint had chipped, Lena moved to the first tank and checked the gauge. Still half full. More than enough for what we need. They connected the portable pumps and started the transfer. The sound of fuel rushing through the hoses filled the room. Tom kept watch near the doorway. His instincts told him the scouts wouldn't let them work in peace for long. He was right. A dull thud echoed through the station's walls, followed by the sound of boots on metal. They're here, Tom said. Lena didn't look up. Keep them busy. We're almost done. Tom stepped into the corridor, weapon ready. Shadows flickered at the far end as the figures in armored suits advanced. Their helmets glinted under the weak light, and each carried a rifle-like weapon. Tom ducked behind a bulkhead as the first shot rang out. Sparks flew from the wall where the blast hit. He leaned out and returned fire, forcing the attackers to take cover. Luna's voice came from behind him. First tank done. Moving to the second. Tom kept firing in short bursts, using the narrow corridor to his advantage. One of the attackers tried to rush forward, but Tom's shot caught the edge of his weapon, sending it clattering to the floor. The figure stumbled back, retreating behind cover. More footsteps echoed from the opposite side of the corridor. Tom realized they were being boxed in. "Lena, we've got company on both ends. Second tank is at 70%, she called. Back, Tom gritted his teeth and fired again, forcing the attackers to slow their advance. A moment later, Lena shouted, "Transfer complete. Let's go." They ran back toward the hauler, the heavy sound of armored boots following close behind. Tom fired a few shots over his shoulder to keep their pursuers back. The platform creaked under their weight as they climbed aboard the hauler. Tom jumped into the cockpit, powering up the engines while Lena secured the fuel. The moment the engines roared to life, the scouts moved in. Energy blasts struck the platform, shaking the ship. "Hang on," Tom said, pulling the throttle. The hauler lifted off, tearing away from the station just as the platform collapsed behind them. The two scouts gave chase, but now the hauler's engines had fresh fuel and the extra power made all the difference. "Next stop?" Tom asked over the roar of the engines. Lena checked the navigation display. "A place where the Syndic won't find us, if we're lucky." Tom glanced at her, "And if we're not?" She met his eyes. "Then we make our own luck." The night on the edge of the desert felt colder than usual. The stars above were scattered like silver dust, and the wind carried the faint sound of shifting sand. Ian stood near the campfire, his eyes fixed on the small transmitter in his hands. He had been waiting for a signal all day, but nothing came. Mira sat across from him, the blue tint of her skin reflecting the orange firelight. She had barely spoken since they returned from the ruined city. Something about the way she stared into the distance told Ian that her thoughts were not on the camp but far away, maybe light years away. Finally, she broke the silence. "They are coming sooner than we thought," she said. Her voice was steady, but Ian could feel the weight behind her words. "How do you know?" he asked. She took a slow breath. "The message I got in the city wasn't just an order. It was a warning. My people think I am still loyal to them. They believe I will help them take this land quickly. If I don't follow their plan, they will send someone else, someone who won't hesitate." Ian put down the transmitter. "And you want to stop them?" Mira looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. "I want to give you a chance. Once they arrive, there will be no time for talking. They will act fast, and your people will not be ready." Ian felt a knot forming in his chest. "Then we need to warn the settlement." "It won't be enough," she replied. "You need to leave. All of you. Go into the deep mountains where their machines can't reach. Survive until they pass, or until I can send a signal to stop them." Ian shook his head. "People won't leave their homes unless they see a reason. They won't believe me if I tell them a fleet is coming." Mira's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then you'll have to show them something they can't ignore." The fire crackled between them as they thought in silence. Somewhere in the distance, a low rumble echoed. At first, Ian thought it was thunder, but the night sky was clear. Mira turned her head sharply toward the sound. "They're testing the engines," she whispered. "They're already here." Ian stood quickly. "How close?" Mira rose to her feet. "Close enough that by tomorrow night, they will be in the air over your city. I can try to delay them, but I'll need your help." He hesitated for a moment. "What do you want me to do?" "You'll have to lead me into the old tunnels," she said. "There's a relay station buried there from the first war between our worlds. If I can reach it, I can send false orders to the fleet and make them change their approach." "That place is dangerous," Ian replied. "It's half collapsed and full of old traps." Mira gave a faint, tired smile. "Danger is the only thing we have left to use." Without another word, they packed their supplies. The journey to the tunnels would take hours, and the desert was not kind at night. The moon rose high above them. As they moved, the sand crunching softly under their boots, Ein kept glancing over his shoulder, feeling as if unseen eyes were following them. Halfway to their destination, a faint glow appeared on the horizon. It wasn't the warm light of a settlement. It was cold, sharp, and shifting, like reflections on metal. Mira stopped and crouched behind a rock. They sent scouts ahead. She said quietly, "If they see us, we'll never reach the tunnels." Ein looked around for another path. "There's an old ridge to the west. It'll add ours, but it might keep us out of sight." Mira nodded, and they moved quickly but carefully. The ridge was steep and broken, forcing them to climb over jagged stones and slide down narrow slopes. By the time they reached the other side, both were breathing hard. Finally, near dawn, the entrance to the tunnels appeared. It was little more than a gap in the rock, partly hidden by fallen debris. Ein brushed away the sand, revealing a rusted metal door half buried in the earth. "This is it," he said. Mira placed her hand against the door. The metal shimmered faintly under her touch, reacting to something in her skin. With a soft hiss, the lock disengaged, and the door creaked open. Inside, the air was cold and still. Old cables hung from the ceiling like vines, and the walls were lined with panels covered in faded symbols. Their footsteps echoed as they moved deeper. "Stay close," Ein said. "The old traps can still work, even after all these years." They passed through several narrow corridors until they reached a large chamber. At the far end stood the relay station, an ancient console covered in dust but still humming faintly. Mira stepped forward, her fingers dancing across the controls. As she worked, the hum grew louder, and the air seemed to thicken. Ein glanced at the entrance, half expecting someone or something to appear. "Almost there," Mira said. "Once I send the signal, it will buy us time. But after that, they will know I have betrayed them." "And what happens then?" Ein asked. She didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "Then they will send someone after both of us." Before Ein could reply, a loud metallic clang echoed through the tunnels. Both froze. "They're here," Mira whispered. The cargo hauler shook as it lifted from the sand. The old hull groaned like a tired animal waking after years of sleep. Inside the cockpit, Tom's hands stayed tight on the controls, forcing the ship to keep climbing. "Altitude is stable," Lena said, watching the engineer's display. "But the power flow is uneven. If we push too hard, we could lose the left engine." Tom didn't take his eyes off the horizon. "If we don't push, we're going to have a bigger problem than that." Through the cockpit window, 3 bright points of light were moving toward them. The scout ships were closing fast. Their searchlights swept the desert floor, slicing through the darkness. Lena moved to the side panel and began typing commands into the old navigation system. "I'm setting a course to the relay station. It's east of here, across the stone belt." Tom gave a short nod. "How much power do we need to make that jump?" "At least 60%. She said. "Right now, we have 42. Tom's jaw tightened. "Then we're going to have to make the most of what we've got." The ship cleared the last of the dunes, its shadows stretching across the ground far below. The wind howled against the hull as Tom angled them away from the oncoming scouts. "Do we have shields?" Tom asked. "Minimal," Lena said. "I can give you 5 minutes of protection, maybe 6 after that." "Nothing. That's better than 0. The scanner lit up with warning signals as the scouts locked onto them. A sharp tone echoed in the cockpit. "Missiles?" Tom asked. "Not yet," Lena replied. "They're trying to close the distance first." Tom swung the ship hard to the right, the engine straining against the sudden turn. Dust and small rocks whipped past the hull as they skimmed over the edge of a rocky canyon. The scouts followed. "They're faster than us," Lena said. "I know," Tom replied. "That's why we don't fly in straight lines." He dipped the hauler low. Following the twist of the canyon, the old ship vibrated with every sharp movement, but the narrow walls helped block the scouts' firing angle. Lena glanced at the engine readouts. "Reactor output is climbing, 45% now. Keep it coming," Tom said. For a few moments, the chase stayed at a distance. The canyon walls hid them from direct fire, and the ship's bulk made it harder for the scouts to match every turn. But Tom knew it was only buying them time. The canyon opened into a wide basin filled with jagged rocks. In the distance, a shimmering line marked the beginning of the stone belt, a massive region of sharp ridges and shifting debris. "That's the belt?" Tom asked. "Yes," Lena said. "It's dangerous to cross at full speed, but it's the fastest way to the relay station." "Dangerous sounds fine," Tom said. "We'll take it." They skimmed over the rocky ground, heading straight for the shimmering edge. The scouts closed in again, their engines a dull roar behind them. Then the first shot came. A bright bolt of energy streaked past the cockpit, missing by only a few meters. The shields flared faintly as a second shot grazed the hull. Lina's fingers flew over the panel. "Shields at 80%. Tom gritted his teeth. "Let's hope we don't need them for long." The stone belt rose up before them, towering. Spires of rock, some leaning, some jagged, all shifting slowly with the desert winds. Flying through it was like threading a needle while running at full speed. Tom didn't slow down. The hull weaved between the rocks, its old engines groaning in protest. Dust and shattered stone burst around them as the narrow passages scraped the ship's sides. The scouts followed, but their smaller size let them slip through more easily. Another blast hit the shields, shaking the cockpit. "Shields at 60%, Lena called out. Tom didn't reply. He was too busy steering through a gap barely wider than the ship. The hull scraped against stone, leaving deep marks along the metal. "Reactor at 50%, Lena said. "We're getting closer to what we need." A flash in the corner of Tom's vision made him glance up. One of the scouts had tried to cut across a ridge to get ahead of them, but the narrow gap tore off part of its wing. It spun out of control, smashing into a pillar of rock. "One down," Tom muttered. The other two scouts pressed harder, weaving between the rocks and firing whenever they had a clear shot. The shields flickered again. "Shields at 40%, Lena warned. Tom's eyes narrowed. "We just have to hold until we hit open ground on the other side." The belt spires began to thin. The open desert was visible ahead, a wide stretch under the pale light of the moons. Beyond that, the dark outline of the relay station stood like a skeleton against the horizon. "There," Tom said. Lena checked the scanner. "The scouts are still behind us. Once we leave the cover of the rocks, they'll have a clean shot." Tom's hands tightened on the controls. "Then we make them work for it." The hull burst from the belt, engines roaring as Tom pushed the throttle to its limit. The open desert stretched ahead, every bump in the sand rattling the hull. The scouts opened fire immediately. The shields flared bright, then dimmed. "Shields at 15%, Lena shouted. "Reactor?" Tom asked. 58%, close." "Enough," he said. He yanked the controls hard to the left, diving toward a shallow ravine. The sudden drop hid them from the scouts for a few seconds, just long enough for Lena to reroute power from the shields to the engines. Engines boosted, she said. The hauler surged forward, climbing out of the ravine and racing toward the relay station. Behind them, the scouts fired again, but the extra speed carried them just out of range. Minutes later, the outline of the station loomed larger, tall towers of rusted metal, broken antennas, and half-collapsed platforms. "That's it," Lena said. "If the tanks are still there, we'll have enough fuel to make the real jump." Tom kept his eyes on the horizon. "Let's hope no one else is waiting for us."